श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य नामने प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैत गदाधरा श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नामने गौरत्विषे नमः। नमो ब्रह्मण्य देवाय गो ब्राह्मण हिताय च जगद्धिताय कृष्णाय गोविंदाय नमो नमः। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। हरे कृष्ण। उत्सन्नकुलधर्माणाम् मनुष्याणां जनार्दन नरके नियतं वासो भवतीत्यनुशुश्रुमा। Okay, I think we're supposed to do the 42nd sloka, isn't it? We did 41 last time. So let's do 42nd and then come to the 43rd. I'm sorry. So please repeat this 42nd as well, okay?
Yes.
दोषे रेते कुलज्ञाना वर्ण संकर कारकहि उत्साद्यन्ते जाति धर्मा कुल धर्माश्च शाश्वतः। Let's do that once again. दोषे रेते कुलज्ञाना वर्ण संकर कारकहि उत्साद्यन्ते जाति धर्मः कुल धर्माश्च शाश्वतः। Please repeat the translation. Due to the evil deeds of the destroyers of family tradition
destroyers of family tradition,
all kinds of community projects,
all kinds of community projects,
and family welfare activities are devastated.
and family welfare activities are devastated.
Thank you so much. So very interesting, in the 42nd sloka, Arjuna is continuing to explain and give out his reasoning as to why we are not supposed to fight this war. And he's saying that doshe ete kulagnana. So in the previous shloka it mentioned that how when the women in the family are corrupt, it can lead to unwanted population. It leads to Varna Sankaraha, unwanted population, and that is not required. Unwanted population is not what we need. We need good population in the society. So here it is said that Arjuna is saying that if this unwanted population comes, then what will they, Varna Sankara Karakahi, what will they do? They will destroy the Jati Dharma and all the welfare activities, the community projects will all be destroyed by this unwanted population. And that's exactly what is happening in today's world. We are able to see that such unwanted population, it creates unnecessary disturbance in the society. And they don't allow good things to happen in the society for the welfare of the community. So that is happening right now. So what is this Jati Dharma? So we should not misunderstand here when Utsadyante Jati Dharma doesn't mean the modern conventional understanding of the caste system. See, this was only about 150-200 years ago when this caste system was manipulated by the Britishers. They are the one who created a lot of disturbance in the society by destroying our Vedic tradition of Varna and Ashrama. So I explained to you in the previous session what are 4 Varnas and 4 Ashramas. So this artificial discrimination between the Varnas was created by the Britishers and also to some extent by our own so-called caste Brahmanas who wanted to claim themselves to be superior in the society. So, this particular assignment of Jati Dharma or one's own Kula is not by birth. Krishna very beautifully explains that this caste system is a very scientific system and it is not based on one's birth, but it is decided based on one's guna and karma, one's qualities. Just like a doctor's son, he does not become a doctor just by taking birth in a doctor's family. No, he needs to undergo the education, the necessary qualifications. He has to put a lot of effort in going through the whole MBBS course and then get certified, and then he becomes a doctor. Similarly, an engineer, he has to undergo the training and so much of knowledge, and then when he is certified, he can build a lot of buildings and so many other things. So just like a doctor and an engineer is based on one's qualification, similarly Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, these different categories in the Varnas are not based on one's birth. They are based on one's qualification. So, in the Vedic times, when a child is sent to the Gurukul, it is the responsibility of the Guru to identify the inclination of the child. Where is this child inclined to? Oh, this child is inclined towards studies. He wants to study a lot of things. He wants to understand and gain a lot of knowledge. So this person is fit to become a Brahmana, because a Brahmana's main qualification is to understand knowledge, acquire a lot of knowledge, and they are the think tanks. They are the ones who guide the next level, that are the administrators. So there are some people, their children who are very, very powerful and they have a Kshatriya quality. they have the physical strength and they have the ability, the leadership ability and qualities. They naturally want to rule. So they were trained accordingly as Kshatriyas. And there are some class of people who wants to do business. They are very expert in understanding how to deal with different things in the world. So that is how business class, the Vaishya class was decided. And then the Guru's responsibility is also to ensure that the fourth class, that is the Shudra, they are also to be engaged. And they are supposed to receive orders from the above three classes, and they are also skilled laborers. They are very expert in doing certain things. So all these four categories is not the invention of the Vedic times. Even today, if you carefully see the whole society is actually divided into four categories. There in this world, in our society, we also see there are people who are very knowledgeable. They are basically like scientists and very great professors. So they are like the Brahmana, the think tanks. And then we have the administrative class of people who are also, we also have soldiers, we also have politicians, so they are basically Kshatriya class. And then we have businessmen, they are Vaishya class. And then there are skilled laborers. We also see from a cobbler to a tailor, from a coolie, everyone is required in the society, but the society is naturally divided into these four categories. So Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra is not based on the birth, but it is based on one's own qualification. But today, because there is a conflict between one's own inclination, one's own jati dharma, and what he is actually doing, there is a conflict between one's guna and one's karma. So then a person cannot become happy. Suppose my natural inclination is into music. I want to really go deep into music. I want to understand the music. I want to make my whole life profession as well as my passion is to learn music. But then I am made to learn engineering or become a doctor. Then there is a conflict between my guna and my karma. And a person, when there is a conflict between guna and karma, he cannot become happy. And that is the reason why many people today are not happy in the society, is also because what they actually want to do, their passion, that guna, is conflicting with what they are doing. And that is why we are a complete mismatch. For some people who are working into some corporate world, for them working into some companies and taking orders from boss is just not possible, because their guna, by nature, they are either Brahmanas or Kshatriyas. They cannot take orders. But then what happens is they are made to fit into that kind of a system where there is a conflict between their guna and karma. And when at an individual level, when the person is not happy, at an individual level when the person is not satisfied, then there is disharmony in the family and in the society. So this percolates throughout the whole society because people are not satisfied. So that is why education is extremely important, and we need to set appropriate things for appropriate people based on their guna and karma. And today, because there is no such education, we lack this knowledge of varna and ashrama, and there is complete chaos in the society. So that is what Arjuna is referring here, jati dharma, and he's saying that if this varna sankara, unwanted population comes, then there will be conflict. There will be a lot of conflict. And that shouldn't happen. That really shouldn't happen. So within this jati dharma, there are varnas and there are subcaste also. Because when you take, for example, Kshatriya, a Kshatriya, although broadly speaking there is a Kshatriya, but within Kshatriya there are different categories. Like for example, there is a foot soldier, he is also Kshatriya. There is a commander, he is also Kshatriya. There is a politician, he is also Kshatriya. So even in the Brahmanical culture, in a Brahmana Varna, there are again categories. There are somebody who is very expert in Patana, Yajana, Yajana. They are expert in doing Vedic rituals and all those things. Some people are very expert in giving knowledge. So again, there are a lot of subcategories and subjatis. When we don't fit into this proper hierarchy or the proper structure, social structure, then at an individual level, a person is not happy. So that is what he is saying, that Kula Dharma Shashvataha. So he is using this word Shashvataha here, but Kula Dharma itself is not Shashvataha. We have understood that in the previous shloka. So let's go to the next third shloka, the 43rd shloka, and that's very interesting. Utsanna kula dharmanam
Utsanna kula dharmanam
manushyanam janardana
Manushyanam janardana
narke niyatam vaso
Narake niyatam vaso
bhavatityanu
Bhavatityanu sushruma.
Wonderful. Let's do that once again. Utsanna kula dharmanam
Utsanna kula dharmanam
manushyanam janardana
Manushyanam janardana
narke niyatam vaso
Narake niyatam vaso
bhavatityanu
Bhavatityanu sushruma.
Please repeat the translation. O Krishna,
O Krishna,
maintainer of the people,
maintainer of the people,
I have heard by disciplic succession
I have heard by disciplic succession
that those who destroy family traditions
that those who destroy family traditions
dwell always in hell.
dwell always in hell.
Thank you so much. So, another very interesting continuation here from Arjuna. He's saying Utsanna kula dharmanam manushyanam janardana. So Janardana means the name of the Lord, one who protects. So he's taking Janardana's name here because he's saying, oh Krishna, you are the protector, and as a protector, why are you engaging me in this ghastly war? This is not good. So that's why he's taking, as a protector, you are supposed to protect everyone, but then you are asking me to kill everyone. So that is not good. And then he's saying, Narake niyatam vaso. So this is a misunderstanding in Arjuna's head. So what is this misunderstanding? Narake niyatam vaso. He's saying that, oh, by doing this, by engaging in this war, I am going to go to hell for eternity. Niyatam vaso. So there are many people, even today, they believe that after death, they eternally either go to heaven or they eternally go to hell. If they have done good, then they go to heaven. If they have done bad, then they go to hell. And they eternally reside there. But this statement of Arjuna is not supported by the Vedas. And it will be clarified by Krishna in the future chapters, in the upcoming chapters. So nobody will reside in the hell or heaven permanently. No. See, in this material world, nothing is permanent. Neither hell is permanent, neither heaven is permanent. Like I had explained to you earlier, there are 3 levels of planetary systems. There is the heavenly planets, there is the middle planetary system, and there is the lower hellish planetary system. Trilokya, which Arjuna also had referred earlier. So now what happens is, this Bhuloka, where we are, Bhuloka, this is the planet where we acquire karma. This is the only place where we acquire karma. Either bad karma or good karma. If you acquire bad karma, we will go to the lower hellish planets, and then when we go to the lower hellish planets, we exhaust the bad karma, the sinful reactions, we exhaust and we suffer. And as we suffer, the suffering actually ensures that our bad karma is reducing, and then finally after the exhaustion of all the papa karma, we again take birth in this middle planetary system, this Bhuloka. Similarly, for people who have acquired a lot of good karma, they will go to heavenly planets, and when they are enjoying so nicely for many years, so many beautiful things in heaven, they are also exhausting their good karma, and when that good karma gets exhausted, they again have to come to Bhuloka. So bad karma, good karma people both have to again come back to this middle planetary system. This is called Bhuloka. So this is the place where we can actually get rid of the cycle of punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam. If you want to escape the cycle of birth, old age, disease and death, then this is the planet. This is where we can actually transform ourselves and go to the spiritual world. So now, this kind of understanding that eternally I will be in heaven or hell is also adopted by the jihadis, the terrorists. So the jihadis, they very firmly believe that, oh yes, by killing a lot of people, we will go to heavens, and in the heavens, we will have a lot of sense gratification for eternity. And also, similarly, there are a lot of people in Christianity who believe that, oh, if I do a lot of sinful things, then I will go to the hellish planets and I will suffer in the hellish planet for eternity. So that is not supported by the Vedas. The Vedas do not support this concept of eternity within this material world. So within this material world, there is nothing shashvataha. So Arjuna is here saying, Narake niyatam vaso. So it is not that niyatam vaso. Again, he has to come back to this particular planet only. So that is the misunderstanding here. And then very beautifully, Arjuna is now ending his fourth reason of how there is the destruction of family traditions by the end of this 43rd verse. So here 43rd verse is completing the 4 reasons why Arjuna doesn't want to fight. Now next, let's go to the very wonderful shloka and understand what is he going to say next. Ahobata mahat papam kartum vyavasita vayam yad rajya sukha lobhena Antum swajanamudyataha. Let's do that once again. Ahobata mahat papam kartum vyavasita vayam yad rajya sukha lobhena Antum swajanamudyataha. Please repeat the translation. Alas, how strange it is that we are preparing to commit greatly sinful acts driven by the desire to enjoy royal happiness. Thank you so much. So very interestingly here, now Arjuna is totally disturbed in the mind and he's saying, Ahobata mahat papam. How is that we are overpowered by greed? And now, just to get some sukha lobhena, just to enjoy some rajya sukha, I want to commit this great sin of killing my own swajanam. Arjuna is very disturbed. I cannot do this. Do you think that the Pandavas are greedy? No, not at all. Pandavas are not greedy. In fact, if you see and analyze the whole life of the Pandavas, they were so detached. Most of the time they actually had spent in the forest. Until this time of the war, they were born in the forest and then they were sent to the forest during the Varnavata time. So much of things happened, and then again they were sent back to the forest after the gambling match. If you see, most of the time they have spent their time in the forest and they were quite contented and happy. They were not greedy people. But then, yet they are fighting this war not because of some property issue. Many people think that, oh, the Kauravas and the Pandavas are fighting because of some property issue. No, not at all. This is a dharma yuddha. This is not an unholy war just to assert some property. No, not at all. This is the Dharma Yuddha. This is a Yuddha, a fight to re-establish Dharma in the society, in the whole world. But Arjuna, because his misunderstanding, is now thinking, oh, I've been overpowered by Lobhena. I have become greedy and we shouldn't fight this. This is not good. This is unholy. And he thinks that by doing so, he's going to incur a lot of papa. There is a lot of papa that will come upon him. If you see, these Pandavas, rightfully speaking, Yudhishthira was the most qualified person to become the king. Out of all the Kauravas and the Pandavas, Yudhishthira was actually the right candidate to become the king and rule the kingdom. But then, he was not greedy. They wanted to establish Dharma. The Pandavas are very detached because they are the great devotees of the Lord. We should know this. They are not attached to any material things. But this war is on the order of Krishna. Krishna wanted this mass destruction to happen because he wanted to wipe out all the adharmic elements from this battlefield of Kurukshetra, like we had discussed in the very first shloka of this chapter. So that is why we need to understand that this war is not Adharma Yuddha, it is Dharma Yuddha. It is placed, it is done on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So this is quite straightforward. So we have two more shlokas. So let's complete the next two shlokas and that will be really very nice. Yadi mam apratikaram ashastram shastrapanayah dhatarashtrarane hanyos tanme shemataram bhave. Once again, yadi mam apratikaram ashastram shastrapanayah dhatarashtrarane hanyo tanme shemataram bhave. Please repeat the translation. I would consider it better for the sons of Dhritarashtra to kill me unarmed and unresisting rather than fighting with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare. So yadi mam apratikaram ashastram shastrapanayah. So he is saying here, Arjuna, oh Krishna, I don't want to fight. Let me completely surrender to these people and without having any weapons, ashastram, shastrapanaya, I am going to give away all my shastra, I am going to keep away all my shastra. Let this army, the Kauravas, kill me. Arjuna is thinking that it is better that I be killed by these people than I fight my own people. That is not good. So let me be killed. And Arjuna is convinced now, he is kind of convinced that yes, this is good for me. He is thinking by not fighting and being killed by the Kauravas is good for me. That's why he is saying, I am going to apratikaram, I am not going to resist them at all. And ashastram. See, for a Kshatriya cannot back off when he is being challenged. But this is not a Kshatriya attitude. Arjuna is not showing a Kshatriya attitude here. He is saying, no, I want to back off. Now this is not Kshatriya Dharma. As a Kshatriya, he is supposed to fight, especially when he is being challenged. And especially when he is supposed to protect Dharma, he is supposed to fight. But here Arjuna is backing off from his Dharma, from his duties. And this is not accepted by Krishna. This is not accepted. And if you carefully look at this whole argument of Arjuna, they are very logical. First of all, he said out of compassion, no, I don't want to fight. Then he said, no, if I fight with these people, then there will be, how can I enjoy all this wonderful royal opulence that I am going to get? I will not be able to enjoy by not having these people. And then he says, no, if I fight, then Kulagnanam will happen. The whole family will be destroyed, and if there are no elders in the family, then there will be no one to take forward the family traditions in the future. So elders are required. And then he's saying that Kulagnanam will happen, and then sinful reactions will come upon me. I am going to rot in the hell for all these things. And then now he's saying, I don't want to fight. He's very logical. He's thinking from all different perspectives. He's thinking from the social perspective, he's thinking from the family perspective, he's thinking from the political perspective, because he said community projects will not get over and so much of chaos will be there in the society. So if you see Arjuna, if any normal person in this world, if you see Arjuna's arguments, he will be really convinced, oh, what a great person. Arjuna is really a wonderful person. No doubt Arjuna is a wonderful person. He's a great devotee. But the arguments that he is putting is not great. Because to escape from one's duty by giving all these logical arguments is not good. And this is a misunderstanding. He is already representing his misunderstanding by so many illogical statements also within this slogan. So there is incoherency between his ideas and what he really wants to do. So there is no proper sync between his thoughts and action right now, and that is what is causing a lot of stress within Arjuna. And this happens with all of us also. Many times this happens to all of us. We become confused of our duties. We are totally unaware what is right and wrong. And when we are not placed, or we are not on the platform of knowledge, we can take some actions, we can perform some actions which can ultimately bring a lot of pain to us. So that is why Arjuna is in a situation where he is completely confused. He is not ready to do any fight now. He is saying enough is enough, I don't want to fight. He is thinking this is good for me, let me get killed. And now, let's go to the last verse of chapter 1. So these are quite straightforward verses. And in the last verse of chapter 1, let's understand what Sanjaya is going to say. Now Sanjaya is going to come back and he is going to address Dhritarashtra. So this is what is happening with Arjuna. So very beautifully Sanjaya is now explaining the problem of Arjuna.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Sanjaya Uvacha
Sanjay Uvacha
Evam Muktva Arjuno Sankhe
Evam Mukha Chodante
Ratopastha Upavisha
Suto Muktam Samita
Vistrijya Sasaram Chapam
Vishtisha Vishtanam
Shoka Samvigna Manasaha.
Shoka Samvishya Manasaha.
Once again, let's do that. Sanjaya Uvacha
Sanjay Uvacha
Evam Muktva Arjuna Sankhe
Evam Muktava Samvishate
Ratopastha Upavisha
Tato Paksha Samadhisha
Vistrijya Sasaram Chapam
Vishtisha Satam
Shoka Samvigna Manasaha.
Shoka Samvishya Manasaha.
Wonderful. So please repeat the translation. Sanjaya said,
Sanjaya said,
Arjuna,
Arjuna,
having thus spoken on the battlefield,
having thus spoken on the battlefield,
cast aside his bow and arrows,
cast aside his bow and arrows,
and sat down on the chariot,
and sat down on the chariot,
his mind overwhelmed with grief.
his mind over the grief.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So now this is a a very interesting shloka, and Sanjaya is back into the picture, and he's saying that Evam Bhukpa Arjuna Sankhe Ratopastha Upavishat. So what Arjuna has done now? After giving all these arguments, Arjuna has kept his bow and arrow aside on the chariot and is sitting down. He's sitting down. Visrijyasa sharam chapam. When Arjuna is sitting down, he is indicating to Krishna that I don't want to fight. So, this is an indication now where Arjuna is saying, my dear Krishna, I'm confused and I don't want to fight because this is a very terrible situation. I definitely don't want to fight in this war. So now, this is where we should know that Arjuna, who has now kept his bow down, in the last words of the first chapter, Arjuna has now kept his bow down. But in the last verse of the 18th chapter, the same Arjuna is going to pick up his bow back and fight with the Kauravas. Very interesting, isn't it? So what does the 18th chapter, last verse say? Very beautifully, the same Sanjaya who has now said that Arjuna is sitting down without lifting his bow and arrow. Sanjaya is saying in the last verse of the Bhagavad Gita, he is saying that Yatra Yogeshwaro Krishno Yatra Partho Dhanurdharaha Tatra Shrir Vijayo Bhutir Dhruva Nitir Matir Mama. So wherever there is Krishna and wherever there is Arjuna, there will be victory, there will be good fortune. So that is what Sanjaya is saying, the same Sanjaya is saying. So now what happened between this first chapter and the 18th chapter? What did Arjuna get so wonderful that his whole perception changed? It is a very paradigm shifting knowledge. Bhagavad Gita is a paradigm shifting knowledge. It's not an ordinary knowledge. So right now, when we look at the world, we have a certain perception of the world. But when we understand this knowledge and assimilate this knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, what will happen is, it will be a paradigm shifting for us also. We will start seeing the world without any filters of our perception. We will become free from all the different perceptions that we have. We will become crystal clear in our understanding of the world, understanding our own self. And that is what will happen to Arjuna also. So my dear listeners and devotees, the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, if you take the whole Bhagavad Gita, the essence of the Bhagavad Gita is love. Although this whole Bhagavad Gita has a lot of philosophical concepts, but the real essence of the Bhagavad Gita is love. We understood in the previous session how the dharma of the soul is to serve and to love. Each one of us, every living entity, expresses an attitude of service and attitude of love. We all are having a deep longing within our heart to love someone and to be loved by someone, isn't it? We all want to love someone and we want to be loved by someone. That is the core, innermost feeling that we have. And Bhagavad Gita is actually going to reveal this reality of love to us. Love is a reality. It is not simply some feeling and emotion. It is a reality. But to understand this reality of love, this message of Bhagavad Gita will transform our hearts, which is right now filled with so much of material dirt. Lust, greed, anger, envy, pride, illusion. All these things have covered our heart and it is not able to, we are not able to express our love completely to the Lord and to people. And because of this covering, because of lust, greed and anger, the love that we express is not love. Our love is only skin deep. I repeat that again. Our love in this material world is only skin deep. It means we are attracted only to the skin. Beyond the skin, we don't know what is love. So that is why the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita is important, because it will penetrate through the skin and give us the knowledge of that which resides within our body, the soul, the spirit soul. And that is where our love will manifest, when we understand the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. Right now our love is misdirect. We want to love, but we are loving someone who either doesn't love us, or that person also loves me, but then it is temporary in this world. At one particular point of time, it will end. It will not continue further. This is the nature of this material world. That is why this knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita is extremely important. And the culmination of our love is in Krishna. When our love gets refocused or redirected towards Krishna, the Supreme Lord, from whom we are all originating, then that is the real culmination of our love. That is the real purpose of our love that we have. So the essence of the Bhagavad Gita is actually love. Although there is a lot of war that is going to happen, there is a ghastly war that is going to take place, but then the real purport of Bhagavad Gita is to love. And that is what happens to Arjuna. Some of you must be thinking, Prabhuji, you are saying this, but then in practical life, how do I express my love, and how do I understand what is good for me and what is bad for me? Now Arjuna was very fortunate, because he could get the direction of Krishna directly face to face. But we are not that fortunate that Krishna is present before us and we can clarify our doubts. Then how do we clarify our doubts? That is why this Bhagavad Gita is non-different from Krishna. The words emanating from Krishna's mouth is not different from Krishna himself. So the Bhagavad Gita, the book that you have, is actually the incarnation of Krishna. The Bhagavad Gita is not simply a book. It is Krishna himself. So when you read and understand the Bhagavad Gita, when you hear Bhagavad Gita, you are actually coming in contact with Krishna. What a wonderful thing it is. So, when we understand this Bhagavad Gita, which we are already starting to do, it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing that we are doing right now. You may not realize what you are actually going through, but I am telling you, by the end of understanding Bhagavad Gita, by reading Bhagavad Gita, you will see there is so much of clarity and joy that will come into your life. This is guaranteed. But the question, one more question may come and arise in your mind. Oh, by the way, Arjuna is right now, he is fighting and he is in the midst of war. I am not facing any war. I am happy with my family. I am really enjoying my life. So why should I understand Bhagavad Gita? Isn't it? Some people may ask this question. You may also have this question. It is very nicely said. There is a quote which says, "In peace, prepare for war, and in war, prepare for peace." I repeat that again. In peace, prepare for war, and in war, prepare for peace. So right now we may be very happy. We may be enjoying our life. But mind you, the world and the time that is affecting us is not going to keep us happy all the time. Each one of us in our life will have to face some difficulties in our life, some painful situations in our life, just like Arjuna. Just like Arjuna, we all will face difficult situations in life. And that is when we have to have this knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. So that is why it is good that in this peaceful situation you prepare for war. How? By understanding these concepts, the philosophical truth, the spiritual knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. It will prepare you to face any challenges in life. And this is truth. When you understand and you start practicing the principles, when Bhagavad Gita becomes a very integral part of your life, you can face any problems in life, any situations in life. The toughest of the situations in life you can face when you have this knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. The greatest fear and the danger that we have is death, fear of death. But the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita will uproot the very core of fear, and that is death. It will completely uproot the misunderstanding of this bodily identification. So very beautiful this knowledge is, and I'm really excited to really share this knowledge with all of you because it is so wonderful. Because now the problem statement is very clear. We all have got a problem statement and we understood what is the problem. And now in the next chapter, Krishna, the Supreme Lord, my most beloved Lord, is going to speak to each one of us. He is going to reveal the beautiful knowledge and he is going to chastise Arjuna. Very nicely he will chastise Arjuna and he is going to change Arjuna's perception. And as we are understanding Bhagavad Gita, it will change our perception also. I am sure all of you want to be happy, isn't it? I am sure you are all coming here because at least by understanding this knowledge, to some extent you will start implementing it and then you will become happy. And I am sure it will help all of you. It is very, very powerful. It has helped me. I can see so much of change in my own life. When I am going through this whole journey of Bhagavad Gita and understanding Bhagavad Gita, the more I dive deeper into this, the more deeper I am going. My understanding of the Bhagavad Gita a few years ago and now is completely different. And I feel, oh my God, the very first chapter which I had read about a decade ago and I am reading it now, my understanding is totally different. So it is a never-ending process. You just can dive deeper and deeper and deeper into Bhagavad Gita. That is how wonderful it is. It's very, very beautiful. It is not like the material world, the material joy, which after some enjoyment it will end. No, this is not going to end. I'm sure you all are looking for that eternal, everlasting love and joy, that bliss. That is possible by understanding the Bhagavad Gita. So now I am opening up for question answers. And I want to take some question answers. If you have any, I will definitely take these questions. And let us, based on the discussion that we had today, you can feel free to ask me questions. Or if you have no questions, then I have some quiz for all of you. On the first chapter, we have gone through a lot of things. We have discussed so much of things. But at the same time, it should not be that there is a bypass, you hear and you leave. So today I am going to test all of you how much has really stayed within the 2 years, between the 2 years. So it will be very interesting. So think about the questions, and if you have any questions, let me see the chat section here. Okay, so Chaitanya is asking, then what is moksha? Understood what is good and bad karma and rebirth concept. Fantastic. So Chaitanya, when I earlier mentioned about the concept of Trailokya, see, moksha doesn't mean I get elevated to the heavenly planets or I get demoted to the hellish planets. No. There is progressive rebirth, there is regressive rebirth. Progressive rebirth is going to the spiritual world or the heavenly planets. The regressive rebirth is going to the hellish planets. But Bhagavad Gita is talking about transcending this whole material world. Because even heavens, even Brahmaloka, even Swargaloka is all the part of this material world, this Anda, Brahmanda. It's all within this Brahmanda. Now what Krishna is telling Arjuna is, you don't have to be within this Brahmanda. You have to escape this Brahmanda, which is even beyond the Swarga and Brahmaloka. And that is the spiritual world. So there is a complete different world altogether where there is no birth, no old age, no disease and no death. That is the world where we all belong to. Unfortunately, we are here in this Brahmanda, stuck up in this Brahmanda, continuously repeating birth, sometimes enjoying in the heavens, sometimes enjoying in the hellish planets, and sometimes enjoying and suffering in this middle planetary system. No. So moksha means transcending or going beyond this material world into the spiritual world. That is called moksha, liberation. So anything within this material world is not moksha. It is not moksha. So I hope that clarifies your question. And Hina ma'am is asking, Prabhuji, regarding the Varna system, why was Karna and Ekalavya refused to be taught by gurus like Drona due to their caste, lineage? It goes against the system of guru finding the inclination, flair of the student. Fantastic, very good question. Now, let us take the example of Karna. When Karna approached Dronacharya, he thought that it is my birthright. By the way, at that point of time, even Dronacharya was not aware that he is a Kshatriya. Although Dronacharya saw that Karna was having the ability to fight, but his attitude was he didn't want to gain knowledge from Dronacharya for using that knowledge for dharma, but he just wanted to compete with Arjuna and he wanted to prove himself to be the greatest in the world. There was a pride in Karna that I am the greatest. So many times Guru also identifies when there is a pride, then Guru will not teach. Guru will have different lessons for the student. So when we approach a Guru, we should approach the Guru in a very humble attitude. And that was very clear. You see, when Karna did not get knowledge from Dronacharya, he said, oh, if not Dronacharya, I will go to Parashurama. I will go there. That was his attitude. You see, that is pride. So if it's okay, let me not get Dronacharya as my Guru, let me accept Parashurama, and that is why he rejected, he left Dronacharya and he went directly to Parashurama because he was thinking, anyway I have another option. So these kind of attitudes is not good, and this was identified Dronacharya. Dronacharya could clearly see that Karna was approaching him with pride to prove himself to be the greatest and wanted to compete with others. So that is not a good attitude of a student. So that is Karna's position. Why Dronacharya rejected him? That is number one, and that was definitely not based on his Varna, because Dronacharya was a very learned Brahmana. He definitely did not discriminate between anyone. But in Karna's situation, because of pride, he had to reject Karna. But now coming to the question of Ekalavya, a very interesting thing. Ekalavya, no doubt, he was very devout, and although Dronacharya did not teach him in the presence of the Kauravas and the Pandavas, Dronacharya also had taken this teaching profession exclusively for the Kaurav family, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. So he didn't want anybody else also to come into the Guru under his shelter, because it was funded by the Kauravas and it was exclusively meant only for the Pandavas and the Kauravas on the orders of Bhishma. That was another reason. But although it is said that Dronacharya rejected Ekalavya, it is not true. Dronacharya, in front of his other disciples, he rejected Ekalavya But since he has taken the thumb of Ekalavya, the Guru Dakshina, he actually taught Ekalavya also the science of archery in a mountain. I forgot that, it's beating my memory right now. So there is a mountain where Dronacharya taught Ekalavya also, which is generally not shown in the TV shows. In the TV Mahabharata and all, we make it, it is very dramatic, and they don't show all these details. But the scriptures explain that how Dronacharya actually taught even Ekalavya. But another reason why Dronacharya didn't want to teach Ekalavya is also because this Ekalavya, he was belonging to the lower caste that time. He was basically a tribal, and by getting this knowledge of archery, he was going to fight against the Pandavas in the future. And that happened. This very same Ekalavya, he fought against Krishna. When Jarasandha was attacking Krishna in Dwaraka, this Ekalavya also participated on the side of Jarasandha, and he fought against Krishna. So that is why we should be very careful. A guru should identify not just his varna, not just his inclination, but also should see where will this person use this knowledge and direct this knowledge. So that is why a guru's responsibility is not just to impart knowledge, but also to ensure that the student uses this knowledge in dharma, for the dharmic process, not for a dharma. But Ekalavya, he fought against the Supreme Lord. Can you imagine? So these details are generally not given or shown in the TV serials. So we should we should understand scriptures from the Acharya. So Madhvacharya explains very beautifully all these intricacies in his Mahabharata Takpar Nirnaya. Why Karna was rejected because of his pride, and Ekalavya was also, although he was taught, but he was still not taught within the circle, because it was very well known to Dronacharya he is going to use it against the Lord. So that is not what Guru. Guru means one who brings the disciple and the Lord closer to each other. But here Ekalavya was against the Lord. So that is one reason why Dronacharya did not teach him in the presence of the other Pandavas and Kauravas. So hope that answers your question. Are there any questions? Alright, so good, very nice, thank you so much. So we will leave now. Please take care, be safe. We will meet again next Sunday. Take care.